We have, we can advance the slide, Gloria. So Gloria Bruce is helping us and has been helping us as a liaison with the sort of Summit Planning Committee. So thank you, Gloria. And we are going to, we're going to do some introductions. You will notice we have someone, she's looking for parking in this virtual world, so just give her a few minutes. But we're gonna go ahead and get started. My name is Precious Stroud. I'm the founder of BlackFemaleProject, and I'm here with Dana.
Hi everyone, my name is Dana Fitchett. I work alongside Precious on BlackFemaleProject, primarily on our writing and editing and curating the voice of BlackFemaleProject over the past several years. Happy to be here.
So we could go ahead to the next area. And what we want to do is tell you a little about what the agenda is for the session. We are going to do some welcome and introductions. We'll tell you a little bit about BlackFemaleProject, share some information, then move into the report, but we're going to be flexible and dynamic in this virtual world. The first, thank you for being here. And then second, we ask for your patience and grace, because all of this is new for all of us, and we are excited, and also just ask for your grace as we navigate this platform, and also making this as much as an engagement as possible. So we'll then move into some high level conversation about the report, Reflections 2020, that was literally released yesterday. And so this is we're so excited that you are the first people who are going to hear from Dr. McGlawn and who I like to call Professor Fitchett, who will talk about the process of curating the report a little bit, what our findings are, and then how we heal as a community, how we heal as, Black women specifically. I know for those of you who were in the main session, you probably know by now, but for anyone new, if you double click on the presentation square, it will become larger for you so you can see it more clearly. And then we'll have a Q&A, which we've renamed discussion, because really we want to be in conversation, because sharing information. Welcome everyone. We have, we can advance the slide, Gloria. So Gloria Bruce is helping us and has been helping us as a liaison with the sort of Summit Planning Committee. So thank you, Gloria. And we are going to, we're going to do some introductions. You will notice we have someone, she's looking for parking in this virtual world, so just give her a few minutes. But we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Precious Stroud. I'm the founder of BlackFemaleProject, and I'm here with Dana.
Hi everyone, my name is Dana Fitchett. I work alongside Precious on BlackFemaleProject, primarily on our writing and editing and curating the voice of BlackFemaleProject over the past several years. Happy to be here.
So we could go ahead to the next area. And what we want to do is tell you a little about what the agenda is for the session. We are going to do some welcome and introductions. We'll tell you a little bit about BlackFemaleProject, share some information, then move into the report, but we're going to be flexible and dynamic in this virtual world. The first, thank you for being here. And then second, we ask for your patience and grace, because all of this is new for all of us, and we are excited, and also just ask for your grace as we navigate this platform, and also making this as much as an engagement as possible. So we'll then move into some high level conversation about the report, Reflections 2020, that was literally released yesterday. And so we're so excited that you are the first people who are going to hear from Dr. McGlawn, and who I like to call Professor Fitchett, who will talk about the process of curating the report a little bit, what our findings are, and then how we heal as a community, how we heal as Black women specifically. I know for those of you who were in the main session, you probably know by now, but for anyone new, if you double click on the presentation square, it will become larger for you so you can see it more clearly. And then we'll have a Q&A, which we've renamed discussion, because really we want to be in conversation, because sharing information, we're blessed to have your feedback, also blessed to learn from your experiences. Black Female Project is all about learning and sharing what we learn. So Gloria, we can move along to the session outcomes, I believe is the next slide. Okay, so let me make it bigger. If I double click on it, it will get larger. So we want to participate in the live discussion. It's centered on healing from workplace trauma. We are going to talk about some ways to increase resiliency and also decrease stress, and then really give an opportunity for us to discuss our feelings about workplace dynamics. So all of this work toward anti-racist policies in the workplace are a result of harm being caused. So that harm has been caused across the board, and certainly all the data shows that Black women in particular, regarding promotability, regarding trust in the workplace, regarding stress, have been impacted by these policies and practices over time. So we'll talk a little bit about what does it mean to have this space called Black Female Project, or called your sister circle, or called your women's circle at church, or wherever it is where you're in community with women. And then also talk about what Black Female Project is. One place where all we talk about is workplace dynamics. It doesn't mean that there isn't space for other conversations, but this is the place where we prioritize it. So we'll take a moment here. I talked really fast. I want to introduce Dr. McGlawn, and then also Renee, we see your note about will the slides be available. I believe that the entire presentations will be sent out, as well as the slides from Janine and the planning committee. So before we move on, Dr. McGlawn, would you like to introduce yourself? We're blessed to have your feedback, also blessed to learn from your experiences. Black Female Project is all about learning and sharing what we learn. So Gloria, we can move along to the session outcomes, I believe is the next slide. Okay, so let me make it bigger. If I double click on it, it will get larger. So we want to participate in the live discussion. It's centered on healing from workplace trauma. We are going to talk about some ways to increase resiliency and also decrease stress, and then really give an opportunity for us to discuss our feelings about workplace dynamics. So all of this work toward anti-racist policies in the workplace are a result of harm being caused. So that harm has been caused across the board, and certainly all the data shows that Black women in particular, regarding promotability, regarding trust in the workplace, regarding stress, have been impacted by these policies and practices over time. So we'll talk a little bit about what does it mean to have this space called Black Female Project, or called your sister circle, or called your women's circle at church, or wherever it is where you're in community with women. And then also talk about what Black Female Project is. One place where all we talk about is workplace dynamics. It doesn't mean that there isn't space for other conversations, but this is the place where we prioritize it. So we'll take a moment here. I talked really fast. I want to introduce Dr. McGlawn, and then also Renee, we see your note about will the slides be available. I believe that the entire presentations will be sent out, as well as the slides from Janine and the planning committee. So before we move on, Dr. McGlawn, would you like to introduce yourself?
for being in the virtual parking lot. Thank you, Dana, Precious, and Gloria. Patient with me, as well as those of you joining us. My name is Tameka McGlawn, and I have the humble opportunity to be with you all. I want to say thank you all for having me.
All right, thank you. So we can move along, Gloria. Thank you very much. So the mission of Black Female Project, we prepare Black women, well, we prepare ourselves and be in community with Black women, really talk about the realities of the workplace, and then affirm Black women who thrive at work. We affirm the women who are thriving at work because we really want to know how you do it. We want to know how your body felt, what decisions you made, what kind of support you had in place that allowed you to move into leadership with so much success. And also, we know you didn't do it just by happenstance. Every leader has a leadership journey. And so by affirming you, we also draw from your knowledge. That helps us prepare Black women for the realities of the workplace. And this, it isn't linear. It certainly has moments where there's ups and maybe not ups and downs, but there's movement. There are times when we're more confident than others. There's times when there's more opposition than others. And so the realities of the workplace in a race-based society means that race and gender is playing out in every experience all day long, frankly. So we examine that through your lived experience. My audio is choppy. Is that what I'm hearing? Oh, okay. All right. So we can move along. Thank you, Gloria. And we wanted to introduce, we call this video Black Women Thrive. And before we play the video, I just want to give a little context. We are going to have a conversation after the video. I believe that will happen mostly through chat. And I'll first ask Dr. McGlawn and Professor Fitchett to give their insights. And also, we will then open up to chat. And we want to hear what comes up for you. We want, if there are men, other people, however you identify, whatever your thoughts are, this is about all of us. We center Black women because we want to elevate Black women's leadership, but the conversation is about all of us. We don't work in isolation. We work and live with you all. So we'll watch, we'll have some conversation, and we'll move on from there. So Gloria, whenever you're ready.
Well for you. Thriving is you knowing that there's a long-term goal that can change.
Being a Black woman doing what I'm doing is already, they know I'm already thriving because I'm there. I do something that just by the demographics, it's maybe 5% Black, maybe.
Again, it's going back to challenging yourself. You go and you find the opportunities and you learn and you do the research.
You're doing it with much heart and soul that other people see it. I think you're thriving when they see that genuine part of you.
I spent the better part of 2 decades trying to fit into someone's box, trying to suit up and show up in a world that didn't really accept me. And the most freeing thing has been to follow that artistic passion and to find myself.
Sometimes it's challenging because mentors, advisors, and parents have, the best of intentions for you, but may not necessarily know what it is that you are destined to do.
Relish in the fact that you can thrive and just be the best that you can be. Don't be scared to make mistakes. Don't be scared to ask questions, and always have an appetite to learn more.
Dana, would you like to start?
Sure, happily. So it just brings a smile to my face to watch that video and think about the years that we've spent in conversation and community with so many Black women across generations and industries and perspectives, really grounding in our commonalities, but also in our diversity. And for me, I'm reminded of the someone in our community who says, Black women don't even really belong in some of these spaces, meaning that we deserve spaces where we feel reflected and seen. And in my own professional journey, I feel deeply grateful to be employed primarily through Precious's consulting company and to be primarily in the company of Black women in all the work that I do, and to really have the space to honor my own voice and be seen and see and reflected. And Black Female Project has just been such a gift, as someone who is an employee of Black Female Project, who works on the project, but who also just gets so much from being deep in the narratives that our community shares with us so generously. So I'm just grounding in that, really appreciating our history so far and looking forward to what's to come as well.
Thank you. Dr. McGlawn, would you offer some reflection and open up the chat?
Absolutely. Thank you, Precious. And thank you, Dana. I echo the sentiment, and it resonates so deeply with me. Rarely are there opportunities for there to be a sacred space for and sovereignty and healing and pain. And contextually speaking, when we think about the workplace and all the dimensions of what happens and that we are often exposed to, there's a cost. There's a cost to be at work, sometimes at play or at being. And so this idea of having Black Female Project be birthed from the magnitude of Precious's vision in the confluence of pain and wanting to create something to hold, nurture, and sacredly honor the voice and story and the narrative and the journeys of Black women is paramount. And it's been such a privilege to be in partnership, to be in relationship. It's one thing to have a relationship, it's another relationship. So to be in relationship with Black Female Project and the phenomenal women of Black Female Project. And it's a gift that keeps on. And so this network, this community, this beloved community, is such an honor to be with, for, and in alignment with, in attunement with Black Female Project. And so we are so grateful and gracious that you are joining us. We know you have many choices at the Blow Us In convening, and you chose to be with us. And so we really want to hear from you and invite in, having seen the video, having heard from Precious and Dana and myself. We'd like to welcome you and ask you to share your voice. What does it mean to be a leader in your workplace? How do you navigate race, identity, your womanhood, your being, your totality? How do you show up fully expressed?
I wonder, as people have a minute to think, Kelly, I realize it is the morning and we're asking you to think, if Precious, Tameka referenced this coming out of pain, but Precious, I wonder if you might share a bit about the origin of Black Female Project as people think.
Yes, as I am thinking, whenever I am with, so a little bit, yes, Dana, I will say something about that. And also, Dana is a writer on our staff. She edited the report. She's also a choreographer, an artist, a creative in many facets, and teaches at the university level writing for dancers as well as dance. So these perspectives, then you have an education researcher who is grounded in love, servant leadership, and who continues to lead magnificent projects statewide focused on race equity. Dr. Tameka McGlawn, in being in space with them and having had this vision, but having it be nurtured and fed by women who are committed, who are also leaders in other areas, all of the work just more rich. And so when we gather, the origin of Black Female Project is that I was working in a place and my screen kind of went blurry. And I was trying to figure out, I started looking around like, what's going on? Talked to a nurse. Turns out I was having an ocular migraine, which I had never had before. It was stress induced. And in addition to that, several other things happened. And I started exploring, why do I keep putting myself through these situations? And also, where was the guidebook? And it's not to say that books didn't exist, but when I looked, I couldn't find one. And I knew I had an obligation to minimally document my experience, because if at the time we were telling girls and young women, work really hard, go to college, get your degree, and then everything will be okay. Or, you transition straight to the workforce, but get a good job where you can get a good retirement, right? Because then you'll be okay. But there weren't necessarily those conversations. Some of the people we've been meeting in Black Female Project, their mothers, their grandmothers, their aunties, their communities really nurtured them and did prepare them for some of these things. Whereas for me, in a, I would say a relatively Black conscious family with parents who were educators, and, like I couldn't come home, but I'm gonna tell it. I couldn't come home with like a t-shirt that had somebody, like if they weren't Black, I had to paint them brown. Like if I was gonna wear a t-shirt, if I was gonna have a doll, if I was gonna have anything, it was gonna look like my family. So Black Female Project was born out of this healing journey of myself. It started out as an anthology. We were gonna write a book, collect some stories. Those women asked, hey, can we get together a couple times? That was March 2015. Since then, we have had convenings and conversation series in New York City, Washington, D.C., here in the Bay Area. For over 5 years, we've collected women's stories in print, digital media, numerous events. Dana hosts a session for us called Black Women with White Mothers that has been deeply meaningful for the women who participate in that session. So we try to meet people where they are. So that is a little bit of the history. Now I'm seeing a little more activity in the chat. Would one of you like to read that? And Dana, if there's a specific thing you'd like me to share, I'm more than happy to.
I just thought it might be helpful for people to hear really what it was born of in terms of your own navigation of intersectional oppressions in the workplace. I'm happy to read these comments from Renee and Kelly and Gloria. So Renee said, it's been a journey. I remember the day I realized my purpose and power. I remember the expressed feeling that articulating that knowledge put me at risk with established non-Black leaders. At this point, I show up more confident and unapologetically Black. Thank you for sharing that, Renee. We hear you, absolutely. Kelly shared that being a Black woman in philanthropy carries necessary weight of responsibility to ensure that Black-led organizations benefit from the privilege and access that I have. This means speaking boldly and regularly about what is and what should be. It's long, intensive, and sometimes painful work, yet necessary. I do not take for granted that I am in philanthropy at a time such as this. For sure. Thank you for your commitment to leveraging your privilege there. The multiple jobs we have is certainly a theme across stories from Black women, formal and informal responsibilities that we take on. Gloria shared, I was talking with one of the other Black women on my small team about how it has been challenging to go in these times from not talking much about our Blackness to suddenly having our Blackness be at the center of every conversation, partly because non-Black people need processing and coaching. We need a happy medium that allows us to be ourselves all the time. Thanks for providing this platform. Thank you for that. Juanita shared, my journey has been a lifetime. Learning and self-learning was a significant part of my journey. Participating in many roles in different organizations and groups has helped me build confidence in my opinions and perspectives as a Black woman. Thank you, Juanita. And Angela shares, good morning. Thank you for your presentation and sharing your stories. I'd like to know if anyone has any advice for breaking through middle management into upper executive management and leadership. I often feel like I've hit a plateau or wall in my current field and employer. Not sure if it simply means it's time to move on or if there are additional tangible steps I should be taking to reach the next level. I do think, I don't know if we'll respond to questions right now or later, but that certainly hits on a theme that we encounter in stories of women working and exceeding expectations and still not getting promoted. So you are far from alone, Angela. And Lori shares, in truth, it is heavy lifting every day. White supremacy is so pervasive, and non-Black requires so much engagement. Pushing system change requires resilience. Ashe. And Kelly asks a question, what is your experience in accessing philanthropy to invest in your work? What lessons can you offer to other Black female founders? And I think, am I right that we'll respond to questions at the end after we share a bit more? Okay, and then from Hallie, being in the Silicon Valley has been a challenge until now. The double blessings of 2020 has encouraged other Black women to step up and learning more about housing and the future of putting themselves in a place of power as corporate ownership. Great, right? This double-edged sword of this intense year we're in. And Che responded to probably a couple of these questions. Che is a dear friend of Black Female Project. And she suggested meet with Charmaine McClary, who has a great C-suite course, and Black Female Project has recently hosted her workshop. Thank you all for that input. Tameka or Precious, did you want to say anything in response to any of that?
Thank you, Dana. You know, the oddest hop-in is new for me today. I do not understand why I cannot see any of you, but I am going to take that home with me and deal with that later. We are so used to watching and observing, because one of the things that happens in our sessions and in our conversations is there's so much nonverbal happening that we rely on that a lot to get a feel. Well, probably any person in a conversation would want to have some sort of be able to see. And so I just want to acknowledge, so I did not know that Che was here, but I do want to acknowledge Che serves as a board member and also our programs director at Black Female Project. She's the first person I asked to write a story because I knew we couldn't just use mine as a sample. And Che embraced that and has been right in the midst of this. She also has a podcast. She is a phenomenal facilitator and gifted, especially with group conversations. She works in higher education in the area of diversity and inclusion, and she is much appreciated to be on. Che, feel free to jump in at any point, and thank you. We will respond to the other questions. And Dana, this is so rich and there's so much here. I think go move along to Dr. McGlawn's session, your session, in the next couple minutes, so that we have at least 10 minutes at the end where we can just respond to these questions and hear anything else that comes up. Thanks to everyone. We'll pick up on the presentation. And I will say, while Gloria is getting that up, that Che mentioned, this also came to my mind when the question about moving up, and in addition to what Dana shared, reading some of the stories on the website, blackfemaleproject.org, but also Your Winning Story is the name of the workshop with Executive Coach Charmaine McClary, who also sits on our advisory council, as does Dr. McGlawn, as does Cheryl Davis, who is presenting right now, as does Regina Jackson, whose EOYDC is also presenting. Thank you, Gloria.
I'm so sorry, I just missed your cue. What is it that you need on the
Dr.
screen?
McGlawn?
Well, I'm also going to again say thank you for being patient. I'm navigating all kinds of technical difficulties, and so thumbs up. Can you all hear me clearly? Dana, okay, thank you, Dana. So I think of this quote and with another from Brother in 1961, James Baldwin said, "To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time. So that the first problem is how to control that rage so that it won't destroy you." When I think about, and I believe it was Gloria who mentioned earlier, and thank you, Dana, for reading those. I would also much rather prefer to see everyone who's with us. So I'm just trying to fill everyone in this virtual space. So Dana, thank you for bringing voice inside of the chat space. Gloria mentioned this idea of talking about, it's almost like Black is in this season. And so when we think about how to go from these spaces that have often been silencing in so many instructive, destructive ways to ask us to be invisible, to not show up fully, to suspend what it means to bring our into being inside of our brilliance. I touch amazement within the entire body of experiences related to doing this work around creating a research methodology that would be centered in values, where I would have to also mitigating my own pain to interpret the pain through all of the different engagements that I had the privilege and the honor to experience. And so I hit on the highlights that were birthed through this experience, through the analysis, through the synthesis of data and information and experiences. Time is now. We have the sacred opportunity to share these voices as a collection, and they are elevated in this report in such a way where we invite you in to a process of healing, where I have been pretty much marketing this report in the last 24 hours as something for your spirit, something for your soul, something for your healing. And so I just want to capture this idea of what does it mean to endure pain, to transcend trauma, to be resilient in ways where you remember who you are because you're holding on to it moment in all of the ways you have to navigate the terrain of simply being inside of the workplace. And hierarchy, when you think of hierarchy and you think of the different dimensions of oppression inside of structural racism and sexism, Dr. Kenneth Hardy out of the Eichenberg Institute talks about the more opportunities you have or that you create, the more you have to be mindful of the damage and the assaultive impact of what you experience on a day-to-day basis. So we feature a few of the highlights just to say, come on into this reflections report, see yourself in. You will often have an opportunity to engage in a way where all of the feedback I've been receiving in the 24 hours out, and so far I'm in multiple cities across California, and I've already exceeded 10 states nationwide with getting the message out. So we're just going to give you a few highlights. Gloria, if you could advance to the next slide. I just want to talk very, very quickly about things. Not only did they affirm the many truths of Black women in a way where they were elevated and even excavated in some cases inside of some of the ways in which Black women were saying, I don't have a space to talk about my own pain, let alone And so on this idea of like, what does it mean to create not just safe space, but brave and necessary space that's about creating an opportunity for Black women to their whole, complete, top to bottom, side to side, inside out truth in a way that was going to be constructive. And so inside of our key findings, we recognize that Black female not only created this space for healing, it also created this opportunity to the places of pain and harm and trauma and loss and defeat and despair, and bring into the being of like, how do you move through that? From the vex of like healing and the nexus of like community in love. And so as we think about how oftentimes the internalization of what we're exposed becomes what we carry, this process and what we learn inside of this particular research endeavor based in love was really that the institutional parameters that are often creating the assaultive harm inside of the workspace, if you're able to mitigate and interpret the distinction between what's about it and not you, you create more spaces. And I know Dana's going to get into this about the healing aspect of it. You create an understanding so that you don't carry the burden of that rage. You don't carry the loss, the psychosomatic responses, whether it's loss of hair, loss of sleep, pain in the body, all kind of disconnection, misalignment with what you think, say, and do. And so I just want to feature a few of the themes, some which were shared previously in the chat. Advance to the next slide, please. And so inside of the themes, and you'll get this much more intimately when you report. You got to go inside the report. It's calling you. There's this dynamic, the dichotomy with where this notion of self-sustainability, like how do we acknowledge the assets in the almost like acronym mental, spiritual, and physical talents of Black women to anchor sustainability inside of these spaces while also having to mitigate risk? How do we celebrate and acknowledge the triumphant, and I think Dr. Howard was speaking to this idea of victory. How do we work through our own triumph and transcending these places while we're also feeling our pain? And this idea of health and harm, this dichotomy, almost like, you know, somewhat, there was such powerful assets in terms of how Black women were finding unique ways, including BlackFemaleProject, to say, we have to find healthy ways to process through everything that we've endured, that in some cases, many of the Black women had denied, oppressed, suspended, repressed. And so this notion of taking that, translating it into something that would be space for healing goes to the heart of the project. And so I'm gonna ask Dana to talk more about that healing journey, because one of the things that we're inviting you into, and we wish we had more time with you, in fact, we wish we were in the same room with you, is to embrace this Reflections 2020 report, because it holds at the center all of the magic, the beauty, the brilliance, the genius, the magnitude of resilience that lives inside of Black women in every dimension of their being, while also honoring their pain and the harm and creating space, dimensions to emerge from it all. Dana?
Ashe, thank you for that, Tameka. Gloria, can I have the next slide, please? So I am gonna try to keep it short because I realize we're short on time and we do want a little bit of time to respond to you all if you do have additional questions. But I feel blessed and humbled to be here with my colleagues and sharing with you all. And I do want to ground this portion about what our healing looks like with the help of a quotation from Toni Morrison, who said, "I stood at the border, I stood at the edge and claimed it as central. Claimed it as central and let the rest of the world move over to where I was." This quote for me, I wanted to raise it because I really just want to say that this is us. You know, this is really about centering Black women, and we believe in John Powell's principle of targeted universal, which is to say that when we address the needs and the wounds of the most vulnerable in our society, we actually make things better for everyone. So I can actually get the next slide as well, Gloria. And really knowing that racism, Toni Morrison also reminded us that racism, the very serious function of racism is distraction. So knowing that racism is always going to be there and that it's unlikely that we're going to resolve this issue anytime soon, how do we center and take care of ourselves in the meantime? So we really identified 3 key learnings or approaches to keeping ourselves intact as we navigate the storms that come at us due to intersectional oppressions. The first of those 3 things is maintaining an intact cultural identity. Marimba Ani says that culture is a people's immune system, a concept that I love because we know that we're going to weather these storms. So how do we have a firm foundation, especially in a context, particularly in a contemporary US context where the narratives about Black folks are so often distorted and very intentionally distorted or just denied, you know, and that's in media, but it's also obviously in schools where we're often fed a narrative as if enslavement was the beginning of Black history, which we know is far from the truth. So how do we stay grounded in the glory of our history and also in the active cultural practices that help us stay connected to our ancestry and the power of our ancestry, both in the face of and despite everything that we encounter today? So that's one. The second is something that Tameka, Dr. McGlawn was referring to in terms of systemic inequities and systemic injustices. And, you know, there's a real risk as we navigate these spaces, particularly if we're one of the only Black women in a space, which is so often true. We encounter all kinds of oppressions and what people call microaggressions, what I prefer to call macroaggressions, because I don't think there's really anything tiny about the way that racism and sexism are thrown at us on a daily basis. But there's a real risk of allowing those things to impact our psyche and have us believing that they're about us personally, when the truth is that not only is interpersonal racism a real thing, but that institutional and structural racism is actually built into these systems that we are forced to engage with in this country in a way that's designed to break us down. So how can we look at patterns across the way that these things happen and realize that this is a systemic thing? It's not anything that we actually can solve for. You know, there's something to be said, of course, for fighting the system and trying to break it down and trying to convince people. But back to that Toni Morrison quote, there's also something to be said for centering ourselves and standing strong in the truth and of knowing that that these affronts are not actually personally about us. They're very often about the system of white supremacy and the insecurities and projections of white folks in the face of the brilliance of Blackness. And the third thing is just the importance of affirming oneself and others. So as we know, across history in this country in particular, as Black women, we're often positioned as and expected to be caretakers. And we can look back at the times of slavery when enslaved Black women were forcibly caretakers for masters' white children. We can also look at 2020 in the situation of the global pandemic we're in the disproportionate representation of Black women in frontline workers, essential workers who are, you know, are heroes, but are also hostages and are disproportionately in the face of a deadly virus at this time. So these things, you know, I believe strongly in the need for truth and reconciliation because these patterns continue to regurgitate themselves in our context because we haven't actually truly reconciled our history in this nation. But things that can contribute to self-affirmation, of course, being in community. Black Female Project is obviously grounded in creating community for Black women specifically. I think that can be that you find community among other Black women, among like-minded Black women, or simply among people with whom you can exhale and be your whole self. You know, just finding those spaces where we don't have to cut off pieces of ourselves in order to survive in them. There's a dismemberment that happens that absolutely, and Dr. McGlawn speaks to some of this in the report as well, just the consequences of that type of disconnect that can happen. But also the power of mentorship, being mentored and also mentoring, and how that reflective relationship can be so powerful. Having healthy boundaries, making sure that we're not taking on more than we are able to navigate for ourselves. And identifying practice that help us release stress in healthy ways, and actually dedicating time to those practices, whether that is being in nature or just being with your friends, writing, reading, whatever it is, just making sure that we really do dedicate our time to those things, and realizing that if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't truly take care of anyone else. So I kind of blew through that, but that's because it's 2 minutes until our time. We somehow, I think, just lost Precious. And I can't see the chat, and I don't know why that is. Oh, here we go. Okay. So I'm trying to see if anybody had questions. Oh, Angela, Marimba Ani said culture. Oh, Che wrote it. Okay, yes, that was Marimba Ani who quoted that. And I know that I captured a couple questions from early on. So Kelly had asked, what's your experience accessing philanthropy to invest in your work, and what lessons can you offer to other Black female founders? I don't know what happened to Precious. I think she would be the best person to answer this question. We have struggled to get funding for Black Female Project, absolutely. We just received our first major grant from the Hewlett Foundation that we're thrilled with. We're starting a new project. We've begun the design process of a project called Teacher Truth that will elevate the voices of Black teachers, across genders, in the state of California. So we're very excited about that. Yeah, Precious is, I don't know what's happening either, Precious, but we don't have you on screen anymore. I don't know if Gloria can help you with that. We have.
I'll do my best, Dana. Dana, I also want to let you know, well, while it is 11, I believe the next session is the networking hour. And so unless Connie breaks in and says, no, you have to stop right this second, if you want to take another moment or two for questions.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, do that.
Thank you, Gloria. I appreciate that. So that's what I have to say, on philanthropy for now, Kelly, and maybe if Precious gets back in, she can offer some insights for Black female founders. But I will say too that there is one anecdote that I will share, that we've been rejected for a number of grants, even when we've been invited back to reapply for grants, and have had comments said such as, oh, we needed a cultural element, which has just been completely astounding for me, because there's so inevitably a cultural element, and it really speaks to the erasure of Black women, in my opinion. So yes, Renee, outrageous, right? So that's just some of what we encounter, and that's not even all from white people. That comes from folks of color as well, who have internalized these disturbing narratives. There was also a question from Angela, I think not Angela Wellman, I think the other Angela who's in the room, who said, I'm not sure if it's, this was about tangible next steps to take to reach the next level. And I know that Shay referenced that resource from Sherman McCleary. And I don't know, Tameka, do you have anything to say on either of these questions?
Yeah, I do want to add, I was saying that I think you offered some realistic dynamics inside of philanthropy related to funding the work. And I think that one of the things that I'm learning in the discourse of philanthropy, helpful, especially in this momentum of diversity, equity, inclusion in the social, many foundations just throwing money all over the place. First thing I'll say is all money isn't good money, and it can be destructive money, and it could take you away from the efficacy and the integrity of the work. And I know that those are difficult decisions to make when you're trying to think about how to operationalize the amazing work like Black Female Project. And so I want to just acknowledge the Hewlett Foundation, and they are one of the foundations who've been very explicit about their commitment to this work. This convening, East Bay Community Foundation, another foundation that has been very acknowledging of supporting Black leadership and work related to supporting Black everything. I also will name that the Ford Foundation and Annie E. Casey Foundation are two other foundations that you can access and learn a little more about their current investments. And they too were philanthropically saying, we have to do something different inside of our investments and actually look at changing the way we do philanthropy. Because historically, if you unpack the history of philanthropy, much of it lives in a lot of oppression that Dana so beautifully characterized moments ago. That's the one. And just really quickly, just this whole notion of next steps, I think there were several that Dana featured. And if you go into the report, there's a whole segment on some tangible next steps that are accessible. And they're based upon your context and what's realistic for you and you assessing what you need in order to continue to address just your own healing journey. And so that's why you got to get to the Reflections 2020 report.
Yes, we're super excited to share Reflections 2020. As we said, it just came out. Will be available. We sent it out just yesterday. And I think that we probably, I didn't see any additional questions. And I know that we are a little past our time. Hopefully you can see this last slide. And you can visit us at blackfemaleproject.org. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, easily findable as Black Female Project. And yes, as Precious said, our podcast directory is in the report. And our inaugural story collection is all available online to hear from several different Black women's voices about their professional journeys, broad range of representation among them. Thank you all so much for being with us today.
And I'm not sure, Dana, if people are starting to cycle off, but I just want to announce, if there's anything you want us to know, want to ask, or still need additional information about, please indicate that in the chat. That way we can capture it. And we apologize, Precious is not here to close out with us, but I know that she wants to be. I think she's still trying to get in. And so if there's anything else that we can offer, and thank you, Che, for capturing some of the responses, please leave them in the chat and we will do due diligence to be responsive accordingly.
Thank you for your help, Gloria, also.
Absolutely. Happy to be a part of this. Thank you all so much for your work. Precious, I know you're there in the ether, even though we can't see you. So yeah, wonderful to be with you all here.
Everybody enjoy the rest of the day.